session. This is Chair Catherine Harrington. Today we've had a full complement of commissioners, Vice Chair Commissioner Jerry Willey, Commissioner Pam Treese, Nafisa Fai, and Jason Snyder. So over to you, staff, for our last and final topic for the day, but an exciting one.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Ann Ober. I'm one of the Assistant County Administrators here. We're going to go down the line and get some introductions from everyone, but I just wanted to take a moment first to thank you all for letting us stay at the 1 o'clock time period. We did have some individuals who needed to come in from other spaces. And then I also just wanted to thank Aster for being the lead of this project and all the hard work that they put into making this happen. It's long been in the making, and I really appreciate their leadership. So with that, I'm going to pass it down for introductions.
Hello, thank you for having us here today. I'm Michelle Neese, President at DHM Research.
Hello, my name is Lane Cooper. I'm a research analyst at DHM Research.
Hi, everybody. My name is Aster Pitcher. I'm the Research and Evaluation Analyst in the Office of Access and Opportunity.
So with that, we're going to turn it over. Aster, did you want to say a few?
Yeah, I have a couple opening things, and then I have a couple closing things, and then we'll sandwich presentation kind of in the middle. So thank you to our executive sponsors, to Alicia Sojourner, Philip Bransford, and Ann Ober. Also, thank you to the American Rescue Plan Act Program Manager, Faiza Noor, for supporting this work. DHM Research is the firm that we hired to conduct this community survey. And they're here to offer a presentation of the results of the 2025 Community Opinion Poll. The purpose of this ARPA-funded project was to create a baseline understanding of community awareness and perceived accessibility of county services. We also sought to understand the degree of economic recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic as a part of the ARPA funding. The research team from DHM is going to take about 30 minutes to move through their slides, and then we'll have 30 minutes for discussion. So if you have a question, we're going to hold it for that 30-minute discussion period. I'll be logging a bunch of questions when we're in that period as well, just to make sure that if we don't catch every question that gets asked today, that you've got an opportunity for follow-up on that. I've also would invite any of you to meet with me individually or in a small group if you want to dig a little bit deeper on the data. If there's something you're specifically curious about, maybe in your specific district or maybe countywide trends, I'd be happy to talk about those things with you in a one-on-one way. So with that, I'll turn over to DHM to get us launched.
Great, thank you. Aster already went through the
Here we go.
And we're going to get into each of these areas as we go through. But first, I'm going to start by walking you through the methodology. We talked to 800 Washington County residents, and we did this again in the mixed mode survey, meaning some people we talked to via a live phone interview, and some people got an invitation to take the survey online in their own time. And as we've said before, this mixed approach allows us to meet people where they are and allow them to participate in a way that works for them. It took place in mid to late September, and it was about 11 minutes. The survey was available in 11 languages. And in that 800 people, it included oversamples of people of color and people who spoke a language other than English. I'll walk you through that a little bit on the next slide. We did have quotas and used weighting to make sure that the results we show you today are weighted results, unless I say differently. And it's weighted to be representative of the district. And the margin of error then is about 3.5. Okay, so this is the unweighted sample sizes for various groups. Part of the reason we chose to oversample is to make sure we had enough people in various groups they have a smaller population. So, for example, about 3% of Washington County is Native American, and so if we had done a representative survey, we'd have about 24 people. We'd have a small number of people there, and we wanted to make sure we had enough people who identified as Native American that we could pull them out and look at their results if we chose to. And so you can see here the unweighted sample sizes by ethnicity and also by language. And again, representative of your residents, the most common language other than English was Spanish, followed by Chinese. Okay. This shows you the weighted breakdown. It should match census, but there it is just for the reminder where we're going in. We have people from ages 18 up, evenly split between people who identify as male or female, and about 57% of your respondents identify as non-Hispanic white. The majority of people own a home, and of course, the majority of people took the survey in English. Okay, we just call out here that you have most of the people who took the survey have lived in Washington County for at least 10 years. This is something just to keep in mind as we go through and talk about awareness of programs and whether they've ever used them. We start the survey, as we often do, which is getting a general sense of how people are feeling. And in this case, the question we used for that was to ask them how they would rate their quality of life. The majority of residents say their quality of life here is excellent or good. So that's, generally speaking, a positive thing. It's a good thing. I'll just note about 12% give it that most positive feeling of excellent. And that is, the good thing about that is that's twice as for people who are saying it's very poor, right? So your very goods outweigh the strong negative. This slide is diving in to demographic differences about how people feel. So for this slide, I'm going to focus there on the top row, which is those who gave that positive, excellent, or good rating. The bars or columns that are slightly darker colored are the groups that have a more positive outlook. So you can see, for example, that our older residents, 65 plus, our non-Hispanic white residents, people who speak English, people with a college degree, and people who have higher income and own their own homes tend to say they have a higher quality of life.
There's a lot of overlap there, right?
Yes.
A white 70-year-old who speaks English, college degree, makes a lot of money and owns their home, and they hit every one of those boxes.
That's
So
right.
one end that's every one of those boxes.
That's right. And this slide just highlights the bottom row. The flip side of that is who's most likely to say they have a fair or poor quality of life. We highlight both. Those are not always exactly in parallel. In this case, they line up fairly well. So you can see sort of the counterparts of what we mentioned on the previous slide are the ones who are saying they have lower quality of life here. Okay. We also ask people in an open-ended question, they can answer this however they want. If the county could do one thing to improve the quality of life here in Washington County, what would it be? And so answers, by and large, the most common answers fell into two categories, either cost of living or infrastructure. And so you can see that. And under cost of living, right, the most common focus was around taxes. And then under infrastructure, stuff around transportation, right? Roads.
Could I ask you to define what taxes are? I mean, does that include fees? Does that include, is it only what you might think of as property tax bills, income tax, that type of thing, right?
So we're taking just what people told us, their words, and we're coding their words. And so
So
if
the
they meant
question is simply
simply
taxes.
the question is, what's one thing Washington County could do
Oh, I get
for
it.
your quality of life?
Yeah, thank you.
Yes,
Thank
and
you.
so
Yeah.
whatever words, yeah, exactly, whatever words they use. So different people might have had different versions of those in their mind.
It wasn't multiple choice.
No, although people could, we would code a response in up to 3 categories. So even though we say one thing, some people give us a list. All right. We also asked a slightly different question.
Can I ask you to go back to the last slide, just so we're clear? The 600 sample, 23% of them are addressing cost of living. Is that correct?
Is the number one thing that they would like us to fix.
23% of the full 800. So this is
800.
full results weighted. So all 800 are saying that.
Saying this. And then 19% of them are saying better infrastructure. And then you're disaggregating that 19, 7% more roads, more road maintenance.
Yeah, 7% of the whole, which can add up to 19. But again, because some people are coded in more than one category, it doesn't always add up
Yeah, no,
exactly. I would say that trying to look at some of the demographic differences, people who said quality of life was poor were more likely to want to see improvements to cost of living.
all of
Right?
that.
So there's sort of,
Yeah.
right. So that was sort of one, I don't want to say causal, but that's one relationship you can see. And then this is another open-ended question, but this time we say, what's the most important issue you want Washington County officials to address, right? And so here, homelessness rises to the top, followed by public safety. And I would say in the region overall, these are often in the top 5. Homelessness has been the top issue for the past 5 years in the region overall. So this isn't a surprise. And the difference, between this and the previous question is that one focused on what would help their quality of life. And this is the most pressing issue that they would like to see addressed. So slightly different questions there. So that's why the results, are a little bit different as well. Okay. Part of the survey was also to look at feelings about their economic situation, and 65%, a majority of people in Washington County said they are worried about their personal financial situation. And again, with about 1 in 5 saying they are very worried. We show here on the slide the difference in level of worry by their quality of life. So worry, 78% of those who say they have a poor quality of life are worried about their personal financial situation, compared to 59% of those who say they have a good quality of life. There were, in the report and in the crosstabs, there are much more details about demographic differences. Just a few that might be of interest. Residents in District 3 were sort of the least likely to be worried, sort of directionally. And there are also some slight differences by ethnicity. For example, specifically Pacific Islander and Native American residents are more likely to be very worried. So again, there's plenty of detail in the crosstabs that we can't get to today. I just wanted to kind of call out a few to hopefully draw your attention to that.
Wait, all right. Let me see if I understand what you just said. You could actually disaggregate this data district by district.
Yes.
And you will be able to share that information with the full report, or is that something that, yes?
Yeah, we have the detailed crosstabs. We could absolutely talk about that.
Yeah, we can talk about it, but I'm asking if it will be published
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
with the full report. Okay, I can do the reading. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, because this 65% seemed to me to be in contrast with what we heard earlier, that 70% think it's excellent or good.
Quality of life,
Right.
right?
Quality of
Cost of living,
So,
personal life, personal financial situation.
They're uneasy about their personal financial situation. Even though the county may be good,
yeah, okay.
I'm worried about
Right.
those are not mutually exclusive.
You live in.
Um, and also the majority, 65%, also say they are fully or mostly recovered economically from the COVID-19 pandemic, which to me at least suggests that recovery from the pandemic is not coupled with people, in terms of how they feel about their personal economic situation right now. I could have recovered from the pandemic economically and still be worried about how things are going right now.
If I were to interpret the slide before that, the orange one, differently, to think differently, the orange one, not go back. 1/3 of the people who responded in favor of the quality of life for Washington County are in this 65%, if I read it correctly on this slide, because it says 2/3, nearly 2/3 of people who said, who reported lower quality of life are included in this 65%, right? Run.
2/3 is 65%.
Right. So the 65% is everyone. And so even,
And 2/3 of that is coming from the previous two slides you presented earlier.
I don't think so. I don't think there's a connectivity between the orange slide and whatever color slide you want to say is next.
Yeah, the slides,
Two different.
quality of life rated significantly lower among residents ages 64 and under. That slide is one more, two more. This one right here.
Follow Astor's request and hold that question for the second half hour.
Yeah, but I just want to clarify what the interpretation of that slide you displayed and how it connects to the slide this one, and to that other slide.
So you want to clarify the demographics with the concern about personal financial situation as well as the quality of life question.
Yeah, the nearly 2/3 of the residents in those who reported lower quality of life, I'm interpreting the 65%, 1/3 of it to come from group that the 70 plus that said quality of life for Washington County is good. And 2/3 of it is from the lower. I see you.
yeah,
I will clarify offhand.
I'd like to, I think it would be easier if I had my crosstabs in front of me to
Yeah,
like
okay.
block, or like, so that I could pinpoint, how we're getting to what, or not so much that, how we're feeding into it. I'm not sure that that's entirely true, and I want to, it gets complicated. My head wants to look at more numbers to answer you.
Nice. I get it.
So can I just jump in just from a process standpoint? Thank you for the questions that you've been asking. And this to me just highlights your curiosity into the data. So I would just ask the team, if you get questions, thank you for that question, Commissioner Fye. And I know you don't expect staff to always have the answers, and we may not know and need. So Astor, if you can just log the questions, and we may not even be able to get to these during the work session, but may need to follow up at a later date.
Okay. Okay, so we talked about this, and again, on on the right is just breaking down how people feel about the recovery by how they feel about quality of life. And again, very consistent with the previous slide, people who have who say they have a better quality of life are also more confident about their their economic situation. Okay. We asked people whether they think the county's economy is getting worse, staying the same, or improving. Half said they think it's getting worse. On the right, we are just showing you the context of DHM's past research statewide, which is very consistent with that. About half of people across the state say the economic condition is getting worse. And so, in other words, Washington County looks about the same as the rest of the state.
But we don't have past history on Washington County. Okay, thank you.
In the next section, we asked people a series of questions about the services here in Washington County. Our slides are going to use the shorthand terms on the left, but on the right is what people actually read or heard as a description of them. Just the goal here was to make sure that we had shared understanding of what these terms meant in the survey, because as you'll see, people are not equally familiar with all of the services. So here, what we see are ratings of familiarity ranked across various services, and the most familiar services are on top. And so libraries, community spaces sort of stand out as ones that people are familiar with. Libraries in particular, nearly 48% say they are very familiar with that service. And then you can see, sort of down at the lower end of the list, about half of people felt familiar with housing services, and slightly more with transportation and planning services. Here we again are showing demographic differences. I just want to explain a little bit. The lighter colored bar in each cluster is people who were less familiar with, or familiar with only 3 or fewer services, and then people who said, oh yeah, I'm familiar with multiple services, 4 more are in the darker bar. And so you could see, for example, if we look at just that very first cluster, people who lived in the county 5 years or less, about half of that group, which is one, were familiar with 3 or fewer services. And then close, but not, is the 47% who were familiar with 4 or more services, right? And that group sort of stands out because in most other groups, you can see that it's somewhere between, well, 15%, but about 1 in 5 to 1 in 3 are saying they were, had lower familiarity. Which again is just to say that probably newer people have had less time to become familiar with the services.
Am I reading correct? At high school or less is 60%?
So 66% of people who had a high school degree or less are saying, I'm familiar with 4 or more of these services.
Something's happening right there.
And then you can still see, of course, that those with a college degree or more, 76% say the same thing. So there you can look at that as that's a good strength of what's going well, and also some opportunity to continue to connect people with services or to raise awareness. This is actually, that's not about what they use, right? We also asked people how easy it was to access that same list of services. And in this case, it turns out that the ranking of ease of access was the same order as familiarity, which that's not a given. But in this case, it suggests that if people were familiar and thought it was easy to access. Those two judgments often went hand in hand. But so 86% of Washington residents say libraries are easy to access. 75% say the community spaces are easy to access. You'll also see that, not surprisingly, given what we just said about familiarity, the don't knows, people who are like, I don't know how easy it is to access housing is 4 and 10, 40%. So that's also consistent with the familiarity ratings. Which I just basically previewed this slide. So those go hand in hand. What's also true, though, which is pointed out in this headline, is that housing, yes, 4 and 10 don't know how easy that is to access. It's also rated as the most difficult to access, right? So, which tells me that there are, real challenges for people who have tried to access that service. Okay. Again, the demographic differences across the whole list of services gets complicated. We can't try to show you that all. We did call out a few things, and specifically, we wanted to call out that the Native American residents in Washington County face more barriers accessing the services, right? So they are more likely to say that it's difficult compared to the average of people in the county, except for when it comes to health services. And so the Native American residents who we spoke to actually found health services easier to access than did the average person in Washington County. One of the questions we asked people was related to equitable access, specifically, do you think county services are equally accessible to all Washington County residents? People tend to agree. On balance, 48% agree versus the 37% who disagree. So they're more likely to agree to disagree. And you do have 16% of people who just aren't sure. You can also see that people who are familiar with the services are more likely to agree that the access is equitable. We also asked them to rank the 3 that they thought were most important for the county, that the county should offer. And so here, here you can see safety and justice, health, and housing services are ranked as most important by the residents. Okay. This slide is a bit complicated. Again, we're trying to show demographic differences across the ranking. And so the dot represents which service, the color of the dot represents which service they chose, and the size of the dot has to do with the ranking. So there in the first row, where you have ranked number 1 is a green dot, that means that they chose health as the most important service that the county should offer. And so what you can see by age, within the age group, for example, is that those below the age of 45, younger residents said health is the most important service to offer. And then those above the age of 45 said safety and justice is the most important service the county should offer. So you can just see that there's a slight difference. Usually in nearly every case, safety and justice or health was the top ranked service, except among people who rent, right? And so if you go down to the very last cluster by housing type, people who rent say that housing services is the most important that the county can offer.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Simply because of the title of the slide. Is this, but some prioritize government services versus county government? And my interest was really with regard to health. To say, was the question or the analysis really based on the questions being asked about county government versus just government in general? And the reason I ask that is because both at the state and the federal level, interest in universal health care for all, unease about what the future of Medicare, Medicaid is. We've been through some tumultuous times. So, food, SNAP, medical. So I just wanted to get that clarification.
Right. So in this question, we kept the same description of health that we'd used for all the previous ones. And so it was agnostic on which level government. What it said specifically was health, such as animal services, mental and physical health services for individuals, families, veterans, older adults, people living with disabilities, and more. So we kept that consistency across all of this series of questions.
Okay, so it's not specific with county. It's agnostic. Thank you.
This survey was also a good opportunity to check in with people about how they prefer the county to communicate updates with them. And as you can see, there's a clear preference for people to receive information via email. Again, the full report has a host of demographic differences that I don't want to use up all your time to go through, but just some are probably not surprising to you. For example, people ages 65 or older prefer letters more than other age groups. And so there's also some information in there that might help think about how to best communicate based on the preferences of various groups.
Was this an open-ended or choose one or multiple choice? I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Multiple choice question.
So meetings, was that one of the choices?
No.
Okay, thank you.
It was also choose all that apply. So if you're doing the math and you're wondering why it's right. Okay, so that is the end of the charts and data. The next section really walks through the key takeaways. I'm not necessarily going to read this all to you. We've talked about all of this so far. And just for you to know, there is this summary if you would like to have the quick summary in hand. And with that, we'll open it up to questions. Or actually, sorry, Esther, I believe you had said you wanted to bookend this.
Let's do some questions and then I can do a little bookend to kind of close this out if that feels okay to folks. So, questions. I've logged a couple. I know that we want to hear a little bit more about the full crosstabs with the district level data to have that be made available, which is the plan. I know that when we go back to the slide about personal financial situation, quality of life, I think that the question I was hearing from Commissioner Fye is about sort of who's maybe in the group of people who are concerned about their financial situation and who have a lower quality of life, if I understood the question correctly. So we're on orange slide number 14. Do I understand your question correctly, that we're trying to understand basically who's in the group of people that are in this call out on the right side? Is that the question?
Yeah.
Okay. And what do we know about that?
Are you asking about demographics or understanding the slide specifically? Because what we're seeing here, the 65% is from the entire sample, the 100 people that we asked. On the right, we're breaking that down and looking specifically at quality of life. So those who rated quality of life as excellent or good, only 59% of those people say that they're worried about their financial situation. So they're less worried if you have a better quality of life. Conversely, if they rated it fair or poor, 78% are saying that they are worried about their financial situation. So they're having those who see quality of life as less, there's a relationship there that financial worry might be playing a role into how they're seeing their quality of life. Does that kind of answer the question? Okay.
And then I think slide number 26 is kind of a complex, it's showing us a bunch of information. This is the one that does demographic differences with the rankings of services, with the little dots. And I wonder, sometimes that one is a snag for folks in comprehension just because it's like a lot of data on a single slide. And I wondered if there were questions about that one in particular. I know we had a question about what do we mean by government services, and that was the cluster of services that we actually provide that are considered government services and functions.
I appreciated the explanation. I didn't fully understand what was happening until I got the explanation, but once it came, I get it now. I didn't get it in my earlier, like my review.
Yeah, you have to really get down to much more granular stuff. So for me, I looked at the first row, and with the exception of the person who rents, everything was public safety and health. And the second row was still predominantly it, and housing sneaks in there. Then you get down to the third row. So to me, that just says public safety and health are top concerns of people of Washington County. And then when it gets down to number 3, housing, when you have the number of respondents that own their house, then housing probably isn't a problem. And I was trying to figure out what's of a housing type, what is other? Either rent or own.
Living with your parents.
Yeah, some people
Non-traditional living situation.
yeah, we usually when we ask this question, we offer the option to say I have some other arrangement. Because some people are living with a parent or um students might answer it differently. So uh there is a
Or they don't feel comfortable saying they rent.
Not everybody's renting or owning, Jerry.
yeah.
Yeah, it seems like that. I'm looking at some of the other slides, so I'll get back to you.
So it took me a minute to figure out that the size of the dot was only relative to the ranking.
Yeah.
So I was looking for size differential across the board. It took me a minute to realize that, but that was a little bit like you, Jason. It was like, oh, when I first looked at it, and then with this explanation, it really has helped. And this discussion has helped me too. The other thing that's interesting is watching how the dots alternate between blue and green for first and second ranking. I mean, like you say, they're almost all there, but they switch in terms of ranking. Right.
Are we supposed to make comments now too, or just questions?
Yeah, great. Yes, please.
Comments too.
Say a thing. Love to hear it.
I just quickly, I found it really interesting that of those surveyed, that 88% of them have lived in the county more than 5 years.
Mhm.
I find that really interesting, actually. I also found it really interesting that 65% of all people are worried about their personal financial situation. That's a pretty dramatic number, I think. And my last is more observation too. Public safety and justice seems to be a higher priority in many of these, but it also seemed like an area that people also indicated they don't have a lot of familiarity with, which I thought was an interesting like we know it's important, but we don't really know. I think to me that's a communication opportunity for us with our community overall. If they think it's that important and they really know nothing about it, that's not great.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Have you done similar surveys in other areas in Oregon or in the Pacific Northwest. And I'm wondering how our information might contrast.
We regularly do surveys that are satisfaction with the services in a city, which this is a little bit different than that. So I would say the overall lens of developing this survey was really bespoke to the goals and objectives of the team here. I will say, for example, people generally do believe, right, safety and justice is really important. And to your point, Commissioner Snyder, people also don't really want to be interacting with the police if they don't have to. Not as a negative thing about the police, but that usually is a sign of something
Trauma.
happened, right? Right.
On it when they want it.
Even
They're
that
perfectly
comment that
happy.
the safety and justice system is so much bigger than that. Like that's where I think, because I think you went to right where many
Right.
of our community members go to, but that's just the tip of the iceberg of the system.
Right. And then, and we do often find, to your point, that people are less aware of, say, how does the court work? How does jail work? They just don't know as much, and they will tell us that in other surveys, right?
Yeah.
The don't knows for those specific services under safety and justice are often higher. And I will also say that not in all communities, but in many communities, the sort of library is well beloved and well known by people because it's which is easy access point. And I don't know, I'm old school, so I love the libraries, but I know not everyone goes to libraries, but it makes me happy to still see that a fair amount of people are at least familiar with it.
So I have another question, and that is, when it just in your thought process, do emergency services fall under safety or health you think in people's minds?
Well, in this case, we didn't include emergency services. So I as a separate category, which is, I would tend to we tend to separate out emergency services sometimes to be able to get a slight distinction between a fire and police, for example.
Ambulance.
And an ambulance. And so in this case, again, the descriptions that we provided people.
Government services and functions to have.
Yeah, I'm trying to get to it so we can all see it. In this case, we working closely with the county, we decided to map them in ways that mapped onto how staff thought made sense in this county.
And I was really thinking in terms of perception, your shared perception, because I didn't see it called out in any of those texts. So that's why I was just kind of curious. What
You're
you
thinking
thought.
about ambulance, fire, and
Yeah, it doesn't, it when I think of what people want to have available to them, yeah, it seems like their personal safety might include that, but I don't know. I'm just asking.
Any other questions or comments from more of you?
Question. You remind me, I was surprised. Now I'm trying to scroll to the slide I had about public safety and the homelessness being the most important issues for Washington County officials to address. And that surprised me, especially homelessness, because Washington County, we worked really hard to address homelessness and really did a concentrated effort to try to take people off the street and put them in either pod villages or permanent housing or affordable housing. So that was a bit surprising. It made me sort of go back to what the news has been reporting around homelessness, and I wonder how much of that has factored into people's perception, because there's a lot of conversations at the media level about homelessness and the supportive housing service discussion. So I thought that was, I don't know if you have any qualitative information that you could share with us around this that isn't.
One thing I would say is, again, this was the first round of doing this specific survey for Washington County. I don't have at hand my numbers from other surveys I've done that include Washington County, but we just in December did a survey that was the Tri-County region. Homelessness has been the top issue across the region, and numbers used to be 40% mention, 35% mention it. So I hear what you're saying. We've made a lot of improvement and I would say, and that number could actually be reflective of that lot of improvement, because in fact, when it used to be 30 to 40%, and we would say it's rare to see an open-ended question have everyone agreeing that homelessness is the top problem. I think this probably represents improvement over the past at least 4 years.
Yeah.
But I don't have the numbers in front of me, but that would actually be my guess.
And besides numbers aside, were you collecting some of the qualitative information with this particular question?
We do have the full answer. So homelessness is our code, right? And so certainly the data does have their full responses. And sometimes it is interesting to go through that and get that qualitative sense of, well, what did they mean by that, right?
Or what were they thinking?
Yeah.
I live so close to this and this is bothering me, or yeah. But that's surprising. In terms of the public safety, the reason you said December, as I recall, when you conducted this.
December for my other one. This one was September.
September. When this caught me, there's a lot of activities around public safety issues for the entire community of Washington County. And some of that is the catalyst is the federal agents in our streets these days. So public safety is sort of looked in the lens of I'm in danger, not necessarily for my own police and sheriff deputies out in the streets who are protecting me and my property, but so much so of federal agents that are roaming around in the streets. So that caught my attention to be like, well, what does the qualitative information say about public safety and crime in terms of what people are thinking? So that's where my head was like, oh, it would be interesting to see the qualitative piece of this. Quantifiably, yes, it's
Right. I'm not sorry. Definitely, I think being able to go through the comments would be helpful. I will say we didn't, at the time this was coded, feel the need, for example, to pull out comments about ICE and code them separately. In the survey just mentioned in December, we did. Like there has been a change just from September to December.
Yeah.
And again, the 3 months after this, 10% of people in the metro region mentioned ICE as a top issue.
Yeah.
So there, I mean, even just within those, I also think there was a change qualitatively between the time periods and over the fall and winter.
Yeah. I think in the future, how we define and how we categorize public safety issue or public safety is going to be different, because I think when there is a negative impact from law enforcement, it's sort of, and I think I would hate to categorize everybody and put them in one bucket and say this.
Right.
That's where I think many of us are sort of saying we need to separate who is in public safety, because we are in a public safety crisis. But the initiators and perpetrators are different nowadays, and we're in a different show. So neither here or there. But I appreciate your I appreciate your presentation. Thank you very much. This was very well done. It is a hard pill to swallow around the financial crisis, but it's no secret, right? We are in an affordability crisis nationally, statewide, and here locally. So it really confirmed a lot of what people have been expressing in the community, and this is very well done, and look forward to what the next step is, and look forward to reading the full report and sharing. But I think you really confirmed a lot of trepidations that exist in our community for our residents. Thank you.
So if I might, we haven't heard any last check-in on questions and comments from Commissioner Willie and myself. So why don't we start?
Yeah, I've been kind of going along with it. It was interesting to me to follow up on the thesis conversation about homelessness. That when you look at slide 13 and it says that Washington County could do one thing to improve the quality of life, homelessness didn't rank very high. And then you flip to the next slide where you ask the question, what's the most important issue you want Washington counties to address? It's homelessness. So to me, that was a little bit of a conflict in the priorities of things. And I'm asking the question then on slide, from it's slide 13. Was this again, multiple options they could choose? Or is this one?
This was an open-ended question. And so to me, again, the previous slide probably has to do more with I'm guessing. When I answer this question, I'm kind of focusing on what would make my life better, right?
It's a me.
Yeah, it's
me
it's
about me.
about me. And the situation with homelessness has become such a visible, evident concern. It kind of overrides that focus on me, right? It's sort of like, what do I want the leaders to be doing something about for my community in a way? Even so, that's kind of how I think about it. Is
Okay,
what do they
that's
think is
different.
actually the biggest problem that has to be fixed versus what would make my day-to-day life?
I mean, they're different questions. Like the verbatim questions are different. And
Yeah, now that
they're
you
eliciting.
described it the way you did, I get that one is individual. And I guess it has to be noted that to me, homelessness, crime, and public safety all basically are combined. And so then you've got 33%, so you've got a third of them basically talking about safety and how they feel about it and what impacts homelessness impact.
Right. We didn't combine them all here, but you could combine it in different ways, right? You could put address homelessness combined with affordable housing, for example, and then that would be 22%. So certainly if you sort of did some mixing and matching on how you wanted to categorize them, it might lead you to a slightly different emphasis, maybe.
It's good information, and you've got it broken down in different topics. So then we can do that mix and match.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Sharon.
Great, thank you. I have one question, but it's a little broad. I think we're really lucky to have DHM here. You know, the work that I was familiar with you're doing when I was Metro Counselor, and then Bess as well. I'm wondering, my question is, how do you characterize the type of survey that this was? Earlier, in response to one of the questions, you mentioned a sort of a satisfaction type survey. My words, that. So that's why I thought, I should ask them in the realm of types of surveys. And we in Washington County, at least in the 7 years I've been here so far, the surveys that we have done have been helpful to informing us about what the top 3 issues, for example, people have, and help us shape our local option levies. So that's why I'm wondering, in your words, how could you characterize the general objective or the type of survey that this was for you in your profession. Because you're the pros, I'm not.
Well, I have two answers. To me, this is still a question about services in Washington County, right? And it's more about the familiarity and ease of access rather than satisfaction. And so that's how I would describe it. I'd also say I think this is a great question for Aster to weigh in on because uh, one of the things that DHM does is we fully customize each project to meet the goals of our client. And in this case, Aster is right here and can best characterize what those goals and objectives were for us.
Yeah, I would describe it as a ease of access and familiarity with services type. So we decided not to do a satisfaction survey because the clusters of services are so broad that they could say, I'm absolutely in love with your government services. We'd have no idea what service they're in love with. So that could have been like, I had the most amazing experience getting my marriage license. It was a very special day. But that's not quite the same thing as passport processing or whatever other service they might have received. And so we wanted to be a little bit broader, and because we're trying to establish baseline data, we wanted to get sort of perspectives and opinions about the kinds of work that the county does. We also, of course, had a strand about economic recovery and quality of life types of questions just to get a pulse. So in some ways, I think of it as a kind of community pulse survey with a specific focus on access and familiarity with services, because that's something we could see trending over time, right? What are your top concerns? Do our services sort of align with addressing those concerns? One thing I would also add, I know that we're going to bump up on time here in just a second, is that you'll notice that folks want to address the cost of living, and part of their desire is to lower taxes, but then they also don't want to see any poor people in their communities. And so that's the other sort of tension that I noticed in this survey data is basically some of the open-ended responses are this direct. Some of them are like, clean up the camps or clear the camps and those kinds of ideas, which to me often suggests that people are like, I just don't want to have to see that level of visceral poverty, right? I don't have to witness it. And so part of what I think we're often getting a reaction to is a person who is believed to be houseless, or a person who has a sort of stereotypical presentation as houseless or economically marginalized. People don't want to have to see that, actually. That's part of what we're actually getting some information about. It's like an unpleasant thing for us to say about ourselves, but it's true. And so part of what people are talking about is that. When we also hear people talking a little bit about crime and public safety, when I looked at the open-ended responses there, they're more specific things were like, stop stealing my packages, and I don't want to see people who are evidently intoxicated and or suffering with addiction. And so those were the kinds of ways that people, that's not the only way, but those were the kinds of open-ended responses that we saw in those categories. So these are the very rolled up categories, and there are some much more granular because we have the verbatim text. And so reading through some of the verbatim text is always like really interesting because people say really wild things on there. So I want to,
If I could,
yeah, please.
I asked my question, but I haven't gotten to my comments yet.
Oh, sorry, please.
Happy to be interrupted, but first I want to say thank you very much for doing this, both your professionalism, but I also want to thank specifically Aster, Philip, and FISA, and there may very well have been a wider team of people. Having this baseline survey has taken us, my entire tenure on this board, it took us many years to acquire sufficient funding to have that funding solution to do this. And I'm really grateful for it, really grateful for the scope of the work and to have this baseline. I think there are different types of potential next steps that could be taken. Our comms team is looking at comms improvement, all kinds of different avenues. But I think that knowing that there will be a new board forming in 2027, I think it's going to be very important for them to have a good grounding, not just in the data, but what the objective was for this in establishing the baseline. Exactly what you said about we have a broad set of services. So we really can't ask about satisfaction of county services, but is, to use your words, a great pulse and definitely has met the objective on access and familiarity. I also really appreciate how this survey has helped us understand, given the extraordinary efforts that we took for the programming of the, I'm not going to get the acronym right, the C whatever type of funding we had in the second half of 2020.
CARES funding.
Yes, CARES. Thank you. I could only remember it began with the letter C. And then follow, I know my brain works in strange ways, but then the ARPA funding. And this county has done an incredible job of putting those services into place to help people recover, not just respond to the pandemic, but recover from the pandemic and the economic hardship. And it's really nice to see that validated here. Yay, team. Job well done. And I'm afraid that if we didn't make a point of noting it, then we just go right on by that. But huge, huge achievement by the team. And I know we're closing the books on the ARPA funding in the end of this calendar year, but really excellent job. Thank you very much for being the pros. And that includes you too, Aster, for doing this work and giving us this analysis. Appreciate it. Now, let me turn it back to you, Aster.
Thank you. Yeah, so I just wanted to close by, there's many good things to see here, right? We've got 70% of our residents saying like things are going pretty well, but I want us to remember that about 30% of our community is really struggling. Many are saying that their quality of life is fair or poor. Some number of them have not recovered from the pandemic yet, despite our very diligent efforts. Part of what we might notice about that group of people who's not doing as well is that they're younger. They tend to be people of color. They tend to have lower education attainment. They tend to be renters versus property owners. And some of those challenges are not actually directly ours to fix. Some of those are systemic and structural problems that we would need to collaborate with. And so I think for me, it also helps us be reminded that we'll have to work in conjunction with other offices, other municipalities, to advance some of the work that addresses affordability of housing, that helps people feel safe in their communities, and addresses infrastructure. So there's some stuff that we can do, and there's a lot of stuff that we'll need to collaborate and be in coalition and support with. So I look forward to your support as we continue to do that work together. Thank you.
I did just want to add a couple of things. We've mentioned here a few times that this is the first time we've done this study, that this was a base. And we also mentioned that the ARPA funds are going to be expiring. We do have funds to do one additional community survey. So we are going to use the ARPA funds next year as well in order to see what the trajectory of these numbers are. We'll be basing
What next year means?
September. Yeah.
This
So,
coming
yep,
September.
this coming September. So
This
1
year.
year from
This year.
September.
This year.
This year.
That's why I'm.
Yeah.
Totally.
2026.
2026. So we'll be doing this one more time using those funding sources. And we'll be looking at similar questions to make sure that we can actually see the correlations and the movement that happens inside of this process. So if you are wondering why we still keep emergency services down in governance, it's because we're trying to get a consistent response so that you can look at that again next year. I think that is the only item I had to add. Thank you.
Now that I know the full scope of this, I have a question for you, Tanya, and I'm going to look to you so that it's not weird. Our consultants that we've hired to do this great work. So we know this from our community. What is the recommendation to the board to take action? And what is the action we're going to take now in between the next time what Anne described, the next phase of this effort and the money we have, so that we have, like, what are we tracking? Like, so what is the recommendation? What are the next steps?
So I think there's one, I mean, that's up to your board to decide from a policy direction, based on what you've learned, direction to staff. So that's one bucket. I would say from my personal perspective, I think the priorities or concerns from the community are actually reflected both in your budget principles and priorities are also reflected in our current budget. Your board's policy direction in application and programming of our supportive housing services funds meets what these concerns are. Does it bring something down to a zero? No, but are we putting the dollars to action? The fact that our public safety levy passed, shows that it's support and we're putting those dollars to work within our, frankly, really complex safety system that does not start or end at county boundaries. So that is happening. So I think part of this in these broad opinion surveys, I think there's a policy conversation if your board wants to have that as far as what do you take from this? What I would also encourage you to do is this is a baseline. So this is our first year where there's power in doing the surveys over time is seeing where some of these trend lines lie. And thank you for speaking to that trend line about homelessness, on how that compares. And I know it was just a qualitative, but going from a 40% in previous surveys to a 17% is really helpful. But we can't see the trend lines. And in the middle of these surveys, conditions change. And so, Commissioner Fye, to your question, with the survey taking place in September, and here we are today, there's going to be things that happen in between, but at least we're tracking it over time. These are great tools, these types of surveys, as you set up to go in future years into strategic planning and using this as an information set. It is good in long-term financial planning, budget planning to see where the priorities are. And I also think sometimes it's just a gut check and it's a pulse on where our community is at. In the economics with inflation over the last few years, the job loss numbers that we've seen, I'm not surprised by this. And I asked DHM if they would be surprised, when we had our survey overview. And that's not uncommon to what others are seeing. I'm not minimizing the situation that families and individuals in our community are facing, though.
I think it's also important to reflect on what Astor said earlier, is there's a sphere of control and there's a sphere of influence that we have here. And we can certainly share this information with those that we collaborate with and be aware, but there's also, we have to be aware of where our sphere of influence is.
I think it's an opportunity to use the information in our decision making, our advocacy, primarily.
And our decision making for prioritizing services.
Yeah, to the point
That's the overlay.
County administrator was making around the budget.
Yep.
So thank you very much. I think we're done with this topic and therefore done with our work session meeting of today. We're hereby adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.